Let's talk about strategy execution. You know, formulating strategy is difficult, but executing it is even harder. And sustaining the change is the toughest of all. But without sustained execution, no business strategy can be called successful. And I've found that managers generally get it wrong, even the best managers. So this is a really important module. It's one of the areas where many managers feel a great deal of pain. And this module can help you overcome an enormous amount of that pain. My name is Bruce Holland. I'm the author of the book Cracking Great Leaders and developer of the Cracking Great Leaders program. This module is designed for people who can help change organizations. So they may be boards or senior managers or consultants, either internal or external. They can be strategists and human resource people within the organization or outside helping the organization. But in well-run organizations where strategy execution is really well done, people right throughout the organization become involved. I know from experience that the typical reaction of a group of senior managers who come back from a strategy development workshop and have been thinking about it very deeply and have been very involved in become very committed to it, somehow expect that involvement and that commitment and that knowledge to automatically flow into the whole organization, including people who haven't been there, including people in gumboots and overalls, including the very people who are going to make this strategy come about. But it doesn't happen. It can't happen because the people cannot know about it through a roadshow or some sort of a memo or some sort of a senior manager talk. It's just simply not enough. The whole way we execute strategy needs to be relooked at, and this module is designed to help you think through some of those issues. There are many reasons why you should use this module, but probably the most important one is statistically 76% of strategies fail. And it's mostly during execution. Now, we don't want your organization, the organization that you're working with, to fail. And so this module is likely to put you into the 34% that are going to win. And it's worse than that in a way, because once the organization's strategy has failed, people become really skeptical. We tried that, it didn't work, we don't want to be involved again, and so it becomes really hard to resurrect the thing. I found that even the very best managers have problems executing strategy. But the main reason why is because managers are used to managing and controlling rather than supporting and letting strategy self-organize and emerge through the organization. A strategy like, say, developing a more positive culture cannot be mandated. You can't tell people to smile and expect that they're going to do it. But you can change the organization and make it so that people feel comfortable and safe and willing to be part of the organization and where it's trying to go. Change the conditions and the result will occur, but you can't manage the result in the way that most managers think you can. So execution fails at least 22 ways, and I'm not going to go through the whole lot, but this module talks about why they fail and how to make sure that it doesn't happen. If you're involved in changing an organization, it's vitally important that you understand these 22 ways that they can go wrong and how to make sure that they don't go wrong. Let's pick out a few of these. Strategy execution cannot be managed by control. I mean, I think the way to think of the strategy process is like a chain that starts with the strategy development and links way back to the customer for whom the strategy has to be implemented. This is quite an important image because you can't push a chain. A chain needs to be pulled, and it needs to be pulled by the often thousands of people involved in your organization whose job it is to implement that strategy. And usually these are the frontline people right beside the customer. And these are the people who often have almost nothing to do with the strategy development and have almost no understanding of it. And yet we expect them to pull this chain for us. The second point there, that managers know more about strategy development than they do about execution, I think is true. I mean, I've studied strategy at business schools, and the execution piece is tiny compared to the formulation. There are great scientific formulas about how to formulate your strategies, but it's not so good when it comes to the execution. Execution is largely learned in the school of hard knocks, with many mistakes along the way to successful results. It's not something that's scientific. You are dealing with people and feelings and trust, and you need to take people with you, and you need to make them understand at a very deep emotional level, often spiritual level, why they should be there. And this isn't actually the role of many business schools. Let's look at number 4, that managers don't realise the importance of speed to execution. I know from endless workshops on strategy, I leave people really enthusiastic about where they're going and who's going to do it, and everyone agrees that this is the most important thing they have to do for the next 5 years. And then I come back a month or two later and almost nothing has happened. Now, it's not because they're not enthusiastic, or it's not because they don't care. It's just because when they get back to their office, having spent a day or two doing strategy, they find they're overwhelmed with day-to-day stuff that just has to be done. And so for the first week or so, nothing happens. And then, of course, the enthusiasm starts to dry up. So the solution is to free up managers and other people who can focus on strategy execution. In my experience, a number of project teams are necessary to drive through the change. And a senior manager, if not involved in the strategy, at least needs to sponsor those teams. And so, really important message here about don't leave it to business as usual, but make execution of the strategy part of the organisational aspects of the business. Let's look at number 7, that managers talk about the process of change and not the end results. Now, there's a real lesson here because change is scary. Change is dangerous. Oh, I once heard of a group who were brainstorming around the word change, and they came up with a whole lot of words that came out of this root word change. And then another group came in and were asked to guess what the root word was. And they guessed that the root word was war. In other words, dangerous, often deadly. The lesson here is that there's real fear in the unknown. And so wise managers don't talk a lot about the process of change. They keep focused on the end results, the benefits that will come out of it, the way we're going to be when it's through. Because the goals are exciting. The process of getting there can often be dangerous. Let's have a look at this one here, number 9. Managers focus on what's not working. I was in a workshop about the strategy of a major organisation, and they painted all these terrible trends, and by the time the trends had been reported on, they then asked everyone to come up with some bright ideas about how we could go forward. But everyone was so depressed. There was absolute silence in the room. Strategy needs to be enthusiastic, it needs to be positive, it needs to have creativity, it needs to be really built on a big positive reinforcing wheel. And the way you do that is by looking at what's working, what the opportunities are. You keep it positive and exciting. And near the end, you can come back and think about, well, what could go wrong and what are the threats and what are our weaknesses that we have to overcome. But if you start there, you'll never get to see the big vision. One of the biggest reasons why execution fail is because of number 12, that managers forget that they have to change themselves. I've heard lots of times senior managers in strategy workshops say, look, we need to have our people really positive and enthusiastic and a great culture. But what they forget is no one will make that change unless the managers themselves change. Every person in the senior team simply must walk the talk. Part of the strategy process is to define very carefully what walking the talk looks like. Harry Mills, the author, said, if you accept that 93% of communication is non-verbal, then words are essentially unimportant. It's not what you say that's important, it's what you do. And managers simply must be consistent in their behaviours with their words. Let's spend a minute talking about number 18. that managers give too little focus on the subconscious. What they don't understand, you see, is that human beings are like an iceberg. The 15% you see above the water, the conscious piece, the head piece, the logic, the costs and the features, that stick above the water, that's the bit that they see, but underneath is all of this 85%, the subconscious or the unconscious, which is all about the heart and the emotions and the feeling and the trust and the security. They expect to make change by focusing on the 15% that they see, rather than focusing on the 85% that, although is under the water, is just as real as the bit that they can see. So many managers try to make the case for change by pointing to the numbers, but numbers are much too abstract and remote. So an important message in making change is to deal with emotions. No one will change voluntarily until they feel safe and secure. And yet most managers start off by announcing that in 3 years' time or 6 months' time, we're going to make a whole lot of people redundant. And they expect people to be right behind them in the change process. Change is not logic, change is emotional. The final thing I want to mention here, number 27, use simple terms. There's an almost irresistible need to use really complex language. Talk about objectives and tactics and strategies and 100 other words that are totally confusing to people, especially since everybody uses them in a different sense. The whole thing can be much more simple, and that's what this module shows you. Make it simple, and your chance of being part of the 76% that fail is significantly less. This module will add value to your clients by making sure that their strategies will get implemented, that you won't be part of the 76% that fail. And because you succeed, you won't have the skeptics the second time. You won't find it much harder to come back and next time and make the thing happen. Strategies will be implemented with far less pain because they are planned and they go through with people's blessing rather than people fighting against it the whole way. There are vested interests here that shouldn't be underestimated. Strategies will be implemented much faster. There'll be a far less cost of implementation. I mean, the cost of implementing a strategy is sometimes far more than the benefits you get out of it. And of course, once they're implemented, everyone will be working on what matters most and the organisation will make far more profit. So your next steps are to become familiar with the readings, download them, read them through several times, understand them deeply. Download the process and become familiar with that. Deliver the module and start collecting your revenue tomorrow rather than 23 years later, as it's taken me to develop these ideas. The School of Hard Knocks is an expensive school. It not only takes a lot of time, it costs heaps. And this module is designed to speed the whole process up and save you the heaps of money that could be lost if you don't get it right. So my call to action is to buy this module. It will explain all you need for a really successful workshop, the readings, the exercises, the process, and it is a process that works. I've found it has delighted my clients and I hope it delights your clients too.